We had pretty successfully created a almost magical environment where being transgender or gender creative or gender expansive wasn't a problem, but it was a much bigger problem on the outside world, and Jake had no idea.
Howdy, Sarah Cunningham here. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the founder of Free Mom Hugs.
And I'm Katrina Cobb. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the program director and social media manager for Free Mom Hugs. And we are part of an amazing team.
Our mission at Free Mom Hugs is to empower the world to celebrate the LGBTQIA+ community through visibility, education, and conversation.
And in our first season of the Free Mom Hugs podcast, we're focusing on Pride 365, keeping queer kids alive. In this fourth and final episode of Pride 365, Keeping Queer Kids Alive, we'll be visiting with a fierce mom advocate who has left no stone unturned, as she has been determined to give her trans son the best care for their present journey, as well as their future paths.
What a story she has to tell. I remember meeting her in January 2020, and she had just learned about Free Mom Hugs and flew from California to meet us here in Oklahoma. She is a wellspring of knowledge, and we can't wait for you to meet yet another powerhouse, boat-rocking mom. We want to take a minute to shout out to our leaders and volunteers in every state. They are the example of devotion to celebrating Pride and the LGBTQ+ community 365 days a year. You know, we would not be making the impact across the country without them. They are truly a life-saving force.
Chasten Buttigieg was asked on an elevator at our Love Revolution conference, "What is Free Mom Hugs?" He responded simply, "It's a group of moms keeping queer kids alive."
Dear friends, if you find yourself needing support and someone to talk to, please don't hesitate to call or text 988, the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline, or reach out to our friends at the Trevor Project at thetrevorproject.org. And remember, you are not alone. It is revolutionary for any trans person to choose to be seen and visible in a world that tells us we should not exist. Laverne Cox.
You know, Sarah, as we have been recording these podcasts, each one seems to have a recurring topic come up, which is the pride flag. And I have been going down a rabbit hole of learning more and more about the pride flag and Gilbert Baker and the history of it back in 1976. And I found that it is now at the Museum of Modern Art in New York City. Mm-hmm. And you are going to New York City, are you not?
Am I?
I
am. I am.
You are going to New York City Pride.
Yes, I'm so excited about it. You know, I've been to New York before.
Right.
And I've been to the Stonewall. And I'm so inspired by the story of Harvey Milk.
Yes.
And I want to tell you, I recently found a book. It's called Pride, The Story of Harvey Milk and the Rainbow Flag. And to paraphrase the story, Harvey Milk, as you know, was a man of hope.
Right.
I have to give people hope. And he was thinking about something that he wanted to create or give to his community. That's something that was a symbol who shows who they are and how they feel, something that they can hold on to. And I just think the pride flag is a beautiful illustration of those things. Right. And something to carry during the marches, to help members of the community feel a part of the community. And he says in this book, something to give people hope, something extraordinary. And he knew an artist who could help, Gilbert Baker.
Gilbert Baker.
And the story goes on. It's a wonderful story about the history of the pride flag. And, you know, Oklahoma recently wanted to pass a bill that would ban pride flags from public places.
Right.
And I don't know why, of all the bills, they're all upsetting to me, but this particular bill really upset me.
Right.
Because I think you already have, like, for example, the state capitol or any public facility that might be political, where the community already might feel alienated from. And to take the symbol where you say, if you see a pride flag or a sticker or a Free Mom Hug t-shirt with a pride flag on it, you feel safe. And then to remove those flags, it just made me sad.
Right.
For the community.
Yeah, and I saw here that Gilbert Baker referred to and chose the colors of the pride flag. He called it the natural flag in the sky.
Aww.
And I feel like that's perfect. And a trend that we're seeing now at pride festivals with young people is they are wearing their sexuality flags, specifically beyond the colors of the rainbow, that signify their identity. They're wearing them as capes. Mm-hmm. And it's so moving and so beautiful. If you haven't seen it before, that even in that moment, you know, we hear stories from young people. They might be 16 or 17, and they'll be hugging you all, and then they'll say, you know, well, I got to go change clothes because my mom doesn't know I'm here. Or, you know, I told my mom I was going to the mall, but this was amazing. And these are the kids that are wearing these flags to identify themselves, and even if it's just for one day, they feel good and they feel proud. Mm-hmm. And it all started from a rainbow flag in 1976. That was hand sewn.
Handmade.
Sewn, handmade, each color. That's intentional.
That's incredible. You know, I didn't know about the pride flag and the history of it when I began this journey, but I remember on social media someone shared a meme that said rainbow is a symbol of God, not the gay community.
Right.
And that bothered me. And I prayed about it for a while. I said, God, why is this bothering me? And it dawned on me that meme, it was just made out of hate. It was made out of, and it just hurt my feelings.
Yes.
But, okay, all that to say, the meme bothered me. I didn't know why until I realized it was a mocking the LGBTQ plus community and the pride flag. And then later, when I found out the importance and the significance of the pride flag, and I revisited the Bible story about the rainbow, mm-hmm. and it says specifically for, every living being.
Right.
And that's why I think it's the perfect symbol.
Yeah, I agree.
God's love for every living being.
Sarah, what's good on social media these days?
Free Mom Hugs. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter.
And you know, we have a YouTube channel too that has all of our videos and panels. And our website is full of valuable information that helps people on their journey, whether they're an LGBTQ person or the parent of an LGBTQ person. You can also find ways to get involved, donate, and purchase authentic Free Mom Hugs merchandise. Sarah, have you heard people call the OG Free Mom Hug shirt the billboard of Free Mom Hugs?
Yes, I love our logo. You know, it's recognized worldwide. And when people see someone in a Free Mom Hug shirt, whether it's at a Pride Festival or the veterinary office or the post office, they know that they're with a safe person, and it sends a message that you are a strong and faithful ally. And I love that our merchandise supports the mission of Free Mom Hugs. The funds go directly to impact our programs. Each dollar reaches far and wide and makes a difference to the community that we serve.
Go to freemomhugs.org today.
Sarah here, and joining us today is our good friend and faithful Free Mom Hug supporter and the best cheerleader in the world, Cristina Olivetti, joining us remotely from Palo Alto, California.
We are so thrilled that she is here and that you all will get to hear this amazing story. What I love about Cristina is that in every conversation we have or every webinar she does for us, I walk away enlightened saying, wow, I didn't know that. Cristina Olivetti is a writer, educator, and an advocate for gender inclusion from Northern California. She earned her BA in Women's Studies from Harvard University and her MFA in Creative Nonfiction from Bennington. The founder of a parenting blog as well as the women's leadership organization Shine On Collaborative. Cristina's essays have appeared in Scholastic, Parent and Child, Spirituality and Health, and the anthology A Cup of Comfort for Mothers. She is our educator on gender for Free Mom Hugs. an organization that we love and hold near and dear to our heart, with chapters in every state that supports the LGBTQ plus community and their families. We love Cristina Olivetti.
Yes, we do, Cristina.
Sarah.
I love that. What I love about you is that I wish needs to be a drinking game every time I say wellspring, because you're a wellspring of information, just a beautiful, smart mom. And just take a minute and tell us about your beautiful family.
Well, first of all, Sarah and Katrina, thank you for that generous introduction and for having me, and just for your generosity of spirit. I feel like from the minute we all connected, your generosity of friendship was just tremendous, and I've been so thrilled and honored to be a part of the work you do. And so I'm just being here today is so much fun and such a full circle moment, and I'm just thrilled. So let me tell you a little bit about my family. We are a family of 5, a mom and a dad, and 3 kids. My 3 kids were all assigned female at birth, but one of the 3 was different than the others. And it was pretty clear from early on. So I would say that we really understood that my son was on a different path, certainly by kindergarten. And when he was in 1st grade, he really wanted a short haircut. At that time, we were still using the name we gave him when he was born and female pronouns. But when we cut his hair short, when he was about 5.5, nobody ever read him as a girl again. So people that knew him continued to use the name and pronouns that he was assigned at birth. But in public, I mean, it was like, hey, little buddy, what do you want to eat at the restaurant or on airplanes? Ma'am, your son is the most well-behaved little boy on the plane. Or that just anyone who didn't know him from the time he was born absolutely interacted with him like he was a boy. And at a certain point, we asked our kiddo, hey, do you want us to keep correcting people? Does it make you uncomfortable when people mistake you for a boy? What's that like for you? And he was like, Mom, I think it's pretty cool. And so at that point, we were like, okay. And so we just stopped correcting people. And from that point on, my child became more and more and more sort of boy identified and masculine. He had some anxiety. And so I had gone to a couple of counselors to find out more about how we could support him in his anxiety. And at that time, when Jake was in the 1st grade, it was right when gender dysphoria was entered into the DSM. So it was like a very trendy diagnosis. And every place we went, when psychologists saw my child, they said, oh, do you think, we think the anxiety is from gender dysphoria. And I would go back and I would read the diagnosis of gender dysphoria, which says that the person's gender causes them a lot of distress. That's like the main defining feature of gender dysphoria. Dysphoria is an experience of distress. My child wasn't having distress about their gender. My child was like not able to sleep at night, or would be really afraid of loud noises, or, was dysregulated in some way, I could tell. But I felt like my child's gender expression was calming them, was helping them. I didn't think it was part of the distress. And so I felt at odds with the diagnosis itself. So even though my child would grow up to be identified as transgender, at the time when the gender expression presented itself, gender wasn't causing distress. It was a time in life where, kids were very playful and fluid and didn't care. And we live in a progressive part of the country where, everybody loves what, used to be called a tomboy. So everybody really thought Jake was the coolest girl they had ever met. Like it was more like this girl with a crazy amount of swagger than, and that swagger and the feedback that my child got for their gender presentation was actually a huge source of confidence and happiness and joy. And, that's why my book is called About Bliss. Like, it was so clear that this kiddo was happy in their gender presentation. And so this idea of gender dysphoria was very, very confusing to me at the time. It was super confusing to me. And so I would ask, and I knew about the concept of gender dysphoria. I knew about the concept of gender diversity. And so from time to time, I would ask my kiddo, do you think you're a boy? Like, is that what's going on here? Are you really a boy? And my kid would say, Mom, I'm like, if you had a number line and like 1 was girl and 10 was boy, I'm like a 6 or a 7.
I love
I'd be
that.
like, okay, that's cool.
Yeah.
And so we went on a family trip to Hawaii. And while on that trip, I learned that the Hawaiian culture, the ancient culture in Hawaii, had a gender that's sort of analogous to Two-Spirit in Native American, but in Hawaiian, it's called mahu. And the way I learned about mahu was not that mahu was like Two-Spirit, like multiple, that it was middle. So that was my interpretation of that definition. That's how I understood it. And when we got home to California, I said, hey, did you know that there's a gender in Hawaii that's middle gender? Like, and my child's eyes lit up. Mom, I want to be middle gender. Like, can we have that in California? And so for a long time, we called Jake middle gender. That's just sort of how we in our family talked about it. When people asked about it, I would say, well, my kid's kind of in the middle. We still used female pronouns and the name that we gave my kid when they were born. And that worked for a really long time. It worked for a really, really long time. And what sort of forced our hand, and there were 2 sort of inciting incidents that really changed our path with how we worked with Jake's gender. One was that, when we got into middle school, Jake's, anxiety was still present. And he went to a school where there were a lot of overnights, a lot of like camping trips for bonding for the kids. And my kid was one who had trouble sleeping, like from the time they were like 4 on, sleeping was like kind of like tricky for them. And so Jake asked if he could be in a tent with his friends, and all of his friends were boys. All the friends were boys. But it was a very small progressive school, and the school sort of worked with a couple of the parents and arranged it so that Jake could sleep in a tent with boys. And this was like 4th grade. So that was the plan at school, was always that, when they did tent assignments, whoever was sleeping in Jake's tent, the school would call the parents and check and be like, is that okay? And just make sure that it was all, simpatico with everybody in the tent. And so that was the arrangement. And at a certain point in 6th grade, the school forgot to call the parents and check in. And that set of parents flipped out after the camping trip when they found out who their son had been tented with without their permission, which, certainly hurt my feelings. And also I can see the other side of it. I can see why a parent would be startled that their boy had been put in a tent with a girl. I can completely understand that, but I didn't know anything about it. The parents were very, very upset. Anyway, it ended up turning into like a big kerfluffle at school. And then we ended up changing schools for Jake. It didn't work out. It unraveled into something very, very upsetting and painful. And something that I didn't think, frankly, that the school could come back from, and over time, I have to say that family and the boys never had a problem. And the family, I think, was just jarred, and they've since gone on to my son continues to be friends with those boys. So in the long run, in the long run, it kind of worked out. But in the short run, it was like really, really upsetting. And it was when Jake moved schools that I said, "Hey, sweetheart, what pronouns do you want to use in your new school?" And Jake said he, him. And I said, "Well, great. This is such a good time to try that out. What name do you want to use?" And at that point, Jake said, I want to keep my girl name. I want to keep my girl name and just use he, him pronouns. And I said, "Well, I love you." I mean, it was such a hard moment for me as a mom. It was such a torn moment. And I think it's a pretty big moment in the book too. But I basically said, that's the family you've been raised in. That's completely okay with me. My question for you is, how often do you want to be explaining to people your gender story? How many times do you want to tell it? And do you always want it to be the first thing that someone has to know about you? Because our house is really, really different from the rest of the world. That was sort of the big heartbreak of the whole experience, was that we had pretty successfully created a almost magical environment where being transgender or gender creative or gender expansive wasn't a problem. That was how we felt in our hearts, but it was a much bigger problem on the outside world. And Jake had no idea.
Yeah.
He had no idea that this was going to be a problem. So that was the second piece that really, that was the first piece that really pushed Jake into choosing masculine pronouns. And then the other thing, of course, was seeing his sister grow up and starting to be like, wait, am I going to have to do that? Does my body have to become like that body? And that's when actually Jake did develop gender dysphoria, was with the impending puberty and the body changes that go with it, that it was like, oh, this is the distress that I read about in the books.
Right. The expectations. That's, the world's expectations that weren't with Jake early on.
Yeah, the world's expectations and the realization of, oh, my body's going to change. I don't want that. Sort of like internal and external, crashing in on this poor kid at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that leads me to, I know you have such a long and beautiful journey. And I love how you've shared so far, how you just really tuned in to Jake and what they were going through. And, but tell us a little bit, or if we have time, about the efforts to preserve fertility.
I look back and I think Jake came of age at a golden moment in gender history. Obama had just changed the guidelines for the Department of Education, and it was a real and the Time magazine had just had this idea of, have we reached a gender tipping point? It was a very positive moment. And I think as a family, being from the Bay Area, we felt very, very confident about his future and about he was going to be okay. But it changed very, very suddenly, right? And so, but right before things changed, when we were just starting Jake's medical transition, I was very, very shocked that part of a medical transition was that kids would be infertile. I mean, once I thought about it, it was like, oh, I guess that makes sense. But it was not something that was much talked about as a side effect of medical transition for children, right? For youth. And we don't say this much out loud because it is a controversial topic. And, it's something that it's just hard to talk about. It's complicated and nuanced. But as a mom and as a thinker and as a person, that was a really, really heavy responsibility that I felt like my husband and I were carrying for Jake's adult self, sort of stewarding these issues of reproductive justice that I had worked so hard for reproductive choice, and the idea that as parents, as adults, we were really the people in charge of making a decision for Jake that was about his adult life, which is, of course, the deep, deep, deep difficulty and stress and anxiety for parents when you have a transgender child. It is a humongous, stressful responsibility to make decisions for your child's adult self when they're 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. And it is something that we need to take very seriously, but it's something that's really, I think, between parents and children and their professionals, right? Just like
Yes.
a diabetic child would make decisions with their parents about what kind of supports they would use.
Absolutely.
So when I went in and talked to our professionals and learned that infertility was a side effect of transitioning before puberty, which is what we were wanting to do for Jake, I started doing some research. And it was at Gender Spectrum that I learned that there was some technology coming down the line that might actually help Jake. And so I went on a pretty deep journey, and I was helped by a friend who had a transgender child, whose son had also done this. And it turned out that traditional, or what, not traditional, but typical egg retrieval treatments have been used for prepubertal girls who have other medical conditions that are going to interrupt their fertility. So, for example, young girls who have cancer and have to have a cancer treatment, they were using these methods for girls who hadn't gotten their period yet already.
Mm-hmm.
So there were children already receiving these kinds of fertility preservation treatments before we even considered them for transgender children. And so I just, bird dogged it, and I found a really good reproductive endocrinologist in the Bay Area who sort of theorized that you could do an egg retrieval while someone was on a hormone blocker. But that physician in the Bay Area was even surprised to hear that it had been done before we did it with Jake. And so she called the East Coast doctor, and Jake was the fourth trans boy in the country we know of who was able to retrieve reproductive material without stopping his transition. That was the big newsworthy piece, was that we didn't have to stop the hormone blockers. We didn't have to delay his transition. We just, carried on, retrieved the eggs, and then he went straight on to testosterone. And he's doing so great. He's so great.
That's amazing. Yeah. And it makes me think how you talk about, you are in medical fields, you are a highly educated person, and there are so few people who talk about this, who think about fertility for trans kids. And it makes me think of the bigger picture, and even a story that you have shared with Sarah and I about your trip to the Supreme Court, when they were making these decisions about trans health care, and how within the court, on the court, highly educated justices were using incorrect pronouns. They did not understand what transgender meant, the science of it, the physiology of it. And this was in the highest court in the land.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was. So that was the Bostock case. And if people remember, Amy Stevens was fired from her job for being transgender. And I really felt I needed to be in that room to feel what the highest court in the land felt like when they were discussing my son's future. I just felt like I really needed to be there. And what was interesting about that case was that the justices, the conservative justices in particular, seemed so... They didn't understand the language. They didn't use the language properly. I left the courtroom feeling sort of hopeless, but that particular case, they decided in favor of the transgender community, so that it was determined that firing someone for being transgender was a kind of sex discrimination. Mm-hmm. So it was a huge victory for the community. At the same time, I sat in the court. I listened to the arguments on the other side of the aisle. I listened to the justices, and I felt a great sense of despair, actually. And it was in that room that I had the idea that, like, to keep my son safe, I couldn't count on institutions anymore. I really needed to lean into community. And I really wanted, it was like a kind of flash vision of like people holding hands all over the country, and like a very like grassroots, person to person network that I knew that like whatever state my son went to, I could call and find another mom who could help me understand how to be safe. And that was before I met you all.
Oh,
That was so crazy. I think
yes.
it was before I met you all. Is that true? Is that right?
We met you in 2020, before
Yeah,
2020
so it was
happened.
for sure. Yeah. Oh my gosh, it was 2020. It was January 2020, right before the pandemic. And that court case was in either the summer before that or the summer before that one. So yeah, so I just really felt strongly, because the other piece I understood was that, the institutions hadn't helped me figure out how to preserve my son's fertility, or at least try to preserve my son's fertility. It was through other moms of trans kids. And I think the trans community has always known that the community is ahead of the institutions.
Yes.
Right. And the person-to-person network will protect trans people better than institutions will.
When you were talking about Jake and when you learned about our chapter leaders and what they do across the country, you were saying that it makes you feel better to know there's a safety net across the country of people that will keep Jake safe should he no longer be, with you in California. And as Jake grows up, that there's going to be people somewhere in every state that will
absolutely. And
keep an eye
I
on
think
him.
it's only become more important as these multiple anti-trans laws have been passed. We're up to like 23, 26 states where kids' healthcare is in jeopardy. And so it goes both ways, right? That moms in other states can reach out to moms in California and figure out how to get this done. And there's an active network of professionals and psychologists and moms who are really helping people go out of state to get the healthcare they need.
Yes.
Yeah. And I want to ask you on a lighter note, because we have to ask everyone this about their gay or trans kids. What do you love about having a trans kid? As a mom, you're fighting for them and you're worried about them and all these things that are hard. But like we say, we celebrate the LGBTQ community. We love them. They're a gift. And, what is amazing about Jake?
Well, first of all, he's super creative. And so that's just part of who he is. He's always, marched to the beat of his own drummer in a way that's beautiful and exciting as a parent. And that, you just glow when you see your kid doing their own thing and not looking around at other people to find out what they should be doing. So I love that about Jake. And I just love having a son. I mean,
that's great.
When it's like the mother son dance at the weddings or the bar mitzvahs or whatever, and like we go out there, I'm like, I have a son. It is so great to have a son. And and I do really feel like we have that mother-son relationship. He's like super protective of me, and I don't know, it's super cute. I don't know. I love it. And I love the journey we've been on together. It's been probably one of the most important things that ever happened in my life.
Right. And that's where your memoir about bliss comes in, which Sarah and I were lucky enough to get an advance copy. We felt so important.
Yes, we did.
And
you guys are so important.
We loved it. But the book is so beautiful because it's you, in a sense, documenting the journey from your perspective. But within the book, Jake is with you during these experiences. So, of course, his perception is going to be different than yours as a mom, but it serves as this place where he can go back in time as an adult and see what you all went through as a family, or how something maybe was hard for you that he didn't realize. And I love it.
My hope was to be as honest as possible. So, I mean, and I think going into it, I assume there are things that I will have gotten wrong that time will show, like, ooh, that was not quite right. And I wanted Jake to know how that happened,
right.
to feel the love even behind the mistakes.
It's beautifully written.
Thank you.
Very transparent. I feel like we're just having a cup of coffee and you're sharing your story. And I think every mother with a child on that journey of self-discovery would really benefit from
Thank you. I mean, my hope was that other parents would feel that they were in good company that you can be a great parent and be confused, that, we all know that we're at the beginning of parents of transgender children know that we're a fresh kind of a parent who hasn't been around for a long time, dealing with parental issues that not many parents have dealt with before. And it's okay to ask questions. In fact, we have to ask questions. We have to ask questions. And just because gender affirming care is really, really good, it doesn't mean it's good enough yet. And that was my commitment to Jake, was to push on gender affirming care to be even better than it already is. And I think, especially right now, that feels like a really controversial decision to have made, but I feel like a really positive one, because overall the gender affirming care now is more complete. This practice of helping kids figure out their long-term fertility plan is much more rigorous and a part of the program than it used to be.
Maybe the key is that to make it accessible.
Yeah, I think accessibility will always be the
challenge.
During these decades is going to be the big question. It's not accessible to everyone, and that needs to change. But before Jake and a few other kids, people didn't even think it was possible. So it was a good start. I think a good start, and always so much more work to be done.
Something else we've talked about in those days of advocacy, when it feels hopeless, when you feel a little bit underwater, we remind each other that there are more of us than there are them. And in those tough days, we have to ask all of our guests, what gives you hope?
Oh, I have so much hope. I mean, I think primarily it's that Jake has always, to a kid, encountered kids who support him. So the kids have no problem with this. It's always been the adults, in my experience. The kids understand that this is a natural part of the human family. And for Jake, his experience often is that he can be friends with someone for a long, long time. And it's not until later that they learn that he's trans. And when they do, it changes nothing.
Isn't that great?
He's going to college now, and he's had this experience many times. And, when he is, meeting people and befriending people as the human being that he is, when they find out his gender history, they're like, oh, I had no idea. That's cool. Moving on. It's just not a big part of his life.
It's a non-issue. Yeah.
It's a non-issue. And so that gives me a lot of hope, because the kids really, really, really get it. The kids really get it. And on the human level, people have no problem with this. On the human level, people really can connect with lots of different kinds of people. I believe that. And I believe it about everyone, even people who say they can't, because I've seen it happen. I've seen it happen. So that gives me hope. And you guys give me a ton of hope. You all give me so much hope.
Well, what a legacy you're leaving. A huge, important part of history and the future. So thank you for your work.
Right.
Thanks, Sarah. Thanks for supporting the book, and just for the work that you all do. I mean, I really do think Free Mom Hugs keeps the LGBTQIA plus kid community so much safer. Just to know that there is a group of moms, any state you go to, it's so powerful, so powerful.
Cristina Olivetti, she brings it every time. And I have to say again, wow.
What an incredible story. And we didn't even hear a fraction of it.
Right.
We got to have her on again.
Yes, we absolutely do. And I think her story is one that many people have never heard before. Not even specifically hers, but just moms of trans kids in general. There is so much of that journey that is different even from moms of gay kids. They are very specific in what they go through and their struggles. And I'm so grateful that she was here and honest and shared those, hopefully to educate and enlighten some other folks as well.
I love that she mentioned how when she was learning about gender dysphoria, and when she mentioned that Jake was comforted, he was at ease when he was presenting as
right, with that first haircut. And we see that often even with adults when they get some form of gender affirming surgery, and the emotion whenever they, take off their bandages and see what they feel like is their true self. To us, we might say their new self, but to them, they say, finally, this is me. Yeah. And how amazing that she explained that so well, that Jake felt that with short hair. And I'm sure with people saying, if he held the door, how great that would feel for someone to say, thank you, son. Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Right.
And I love how she found middle gender
in
Hawaii. I've
right.
never heard that story before, but so intriguing to me is the Two-Spirit community. And in some countries, the trans or gender person is considered deity.
Right. Exactly.
So a lot to learn, so much to learn from her.
Right.
I'm feeling a little melancholy.
I know. This is the last podcast of this season of our Pride 365. Sarah, what are we going to do? Plenty.
We got to plan the next season.
That's exactly right. We're going to plan the next season with great guests.
We have so many incredible people in our lives. I told my friend Jan, we were driving yesterday, and I said, we're so fortunate to be surrounded by so many incredible people.
Right.
And I love the work that we get to do.
Exactly. And one of the things I know we touched on with Cristina was that feeling of there's more of us than there are of them. And that sometimes the world appears to be daunting in our view, but we have to remember who we're surrounded by and who's doing the work and telling different stories.
I think you just hit the nail on the head. Is that because I can go down that path too, and I watch the news or just, what do they call that? Doom scrolling?
Yes.
I don't know what that is, but I think it's where you just read a lot of bad news.
Yes.
But when you do that, you have to mentally and physically get yourself out of that. You have to.
Right.
Or you'll just die a slow and painful death. I'm sure of it. But you have to dig yourself out of that and just remind yourself how many good people you have in your life. And if you don't have people that can pull you up and lift you up, then find them.
Right.
Because they're there.
Yeah. And I think that's why our chapter leaders are so important, and we can brag about them all day long. But they are what Cristina said, they're that safety net in every state and city and community. And I think they're a reminder. And like we talk about all the time, even seeing someone in a Free Mom Hug t-shirt at the airport reminds someone that they're not alone and that there's more people out there fighting for them.
We're surrounded by some incredible people, and that gives me great hope.
Yes, and these are people who celebrate Pride 365 days a year. Just because Pride Month is ending and just because the season of the podcast is ending doesn't mean the love for the LGBTQ plus community is ending. Stay tuned as we begin work on a second season of the Pride 365 podcast, Keeping Queer Kids Alive, where we will continue to bring you guests that are a part of fulfilling the mission of Free Mom Hugs, which is to
empower the world to celebrate the LGBTQIA plus community through visibility, education, and conversation.
See you next season.
That's a wrap. Shared with permission. I never write to strangers on Facebook or other social media, but your story and your efforts have forever altered my understanding of humanity. I am not someone who's been shunned by their family, but I know of the reality friends and strangers have faced and continue to face in this regard. Simple acts are often the most heroic. Thank you.
Won't you stand up, won't you stand up, stand up, stand up.
That's it for this episode of Pride 365, Keeping Queer Kids Alive from Free Mom Hugs.
The podcast is produced by our friends at Good Faith Media. Learn more at goodfaithmedia.org. Our music comes from Pond 5. Our theme song, titled Stand Up, is by queer Nashville artist Heather Mae, spelled Mae. She is at Heather Mae Music on all social media platforms. You can listen to Stand Up and more of Heather Mae's music wherever you stream or download music online. Check out the show notes for more.
Join the Free Mom Hugs community at freemomhugs.org,
where you can learn, connect, and be proud.
Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube at Free Mom Hugs.
Be sure to subscribe to this podcast, give us a like and rating, and tell your friends about it.
Stop what you're doing and let someone know that you love them, even if it's yourself.
Stand up, won't you? Stand up, won't you? Won't you? Stand up, won't you? Stand up, won't you? Won't you? Stand up, won't you? Stand up, won't you? Won't you? Stand up, won't you? Stand up, won't you?